Tales from my D&D campaign.
Previously,
Mahar and I will go with you. I have no love for the orcs. One said swords this way. They're headed for the Earldom of Sword. You don't think they meant...
Have to admit, sword from a frost giant boss be hella ka. Hella ka.
Why do you want the sword? We's looking for a way to join Pajor's crew. Del said might be we could show off by taking the sword, and he told us where to find it. In truth, the battle is impressive, but short. And more than a little anticlimactic. Draven's wife Ivana pulled up with her escort. We've received an invitation from the king. They boarded the wagon train and headed west. Sergeant Richard calls out, "It's an ambush!" And he and his men turn their mounts and start galloping back towards the caravan when a golem bursts up out of the highway, sending cobblestones raining down over a wide area. A clay golem? Aren't those weaker than the other golem we fought? Significantly weaker. Even if Midgard's creation was only a nerfed prototype version of the Slaughterstone behemoth. That one didn't even scratch me.
It may have scratched me, but it also had an off button.
Thanks to the two men's reaction to Black's dispelling, the Outriders had turned back before moving into reach of the golem, so much of the surprise value seemed to have been wasted. But then it raised its hand and conjured a blob of goo, which hit the horse of the nearest of Draven's guards, hardening to immobilize the mount as well as trapping the soldier's legs in the stirrups. Is that normal behavior for such golems? This is bad. That looked like psionics. It's one of my favorite psionic powers, and it's only level 1. I think this may be a Dark Ancient. Like Temple 1? Aw, I'm gonna crush him. Before the guard can free himself from his entangled mount, the golem strikes them with a force that transforms them into a lethal projectile, crushing one of the fleeing artificers over 20 feet away.
Wait, he accidentally took out one of his own guys?
Or was that actually aimed? Was that Sergeant Richard? No, it was some other guy you didn't really know. His name was Jimmy. He's dead now. Being player characters, they routinely travel all day in full armor with their weapons close at hand, but it still takes them a round or two to get out of the wagons and on a real combat footing. Much too late for Jimmy. Even then, Draven only had time to cast Fly and then a Mass Shield spell on the first round. For him to bane the party's weapons as he had against the orcs would have taken 1 round per weapon. Similarly, Zahir can only land a couple of his single-target buffs by the time the hand-to-hand fighters head in. Sergeant Richard doesn't want to withdraw, but at Draven's firm command, he pulls all his men back to defend Ivana, and themselves, backing up the wagons a ways, leaving the powerful adventurers to engage the enemy. Clay golems are a lower grade of construct than stone or iron golems, let alone Midgard's inexorable project. But they are still tough. They take 10 less damage from your blows unless your weapon is both adamantine and bludgeoning. Since golems are also immune to sneak attack, Angel had to switch to her backup weapon, her crossbow of force, which does much less damage than her normal attacks, but which penetrates almost any type of defense as long as it hits. And even hitting was not easy, for any of them, as this golem's armor class was significantly augmented. It weathered their first attacks easily, then triggered the signature Clay Golem ability. A swift activation, short-duration haste, giving it a 3rd hard-hitting attack per round, and it split those attacks between Black, Little One, and Mahar. Then it cast Inflict Pain. How can it cast and attack, let alone full attack?
The haste?
The old version of haste worked by giving an extra standard action, so you could do stuff like that, but this is 3.5 edition. Haste only gives you an extra attack when you take a full attack action. It's no help for spellcasting. True. In fact, it's quite possible that it's using a psionic schism, a mental partition which can manifest powers at a fraction of its caster level, in addition to its normal actions each turn. And of course it still has to pay the cost of those powers. Okay, this is definitely an Dark Ancient.
The others attempted to deal with you too indirectly. It is time to rectify their error.
Black and Little One are affected by withering, lasting pain, giving them a -4 to hit penalty, will save for half. -2 to hit even if we save? It's one of my favorite psionic powers, and it's only level 2. They continue fighting, but they're having a very hard time hitting the golem. Angel notices the remaining artificer trying to get away, or possibly to get to their wagons, since he's running parallel to the road. She bolts over to take him out, but a quick sense motive check alerts her that he may have been forced into this. You can still follow through and kill him if you want, though.
I'll just tell him, if you aren't responsible for this, I suggest you don't move.
Okay, he freezes up even more than he already had. I hate to keep spending expensive charges on this wand, but I can barely hit or damage him with my crossbow.
You could just bane my weapon.
Or me. I like Bane.
I don't need Bane to crush this bastard. Maybe if you could dispel it, though. I'm not good at dispelling, and I'm not flying down into reach of that thing to cast touch rain buffs on Black's mace. I suppose I could buff Angel's crossbow.
Forget the crossbow. If you bane my spike chain, I can get more attacks.
You sure you want to get in closer?
Oh, yeah.
Perhaps I can dispel some of its protections. Zahir hits the golem with a dispel, though his average to poor rolls only cancel a single spell. Mahara is rolling above average, but even so, his hits are relatively small after bypassing that damage reduction. And that's when a second clay golem burst up from under the cobbled highway. And Draven's like, "What? That's insane!" And Krillin's like, "This is nuts! I should just grab my wife and fly away." They rapidly learn that although this one hits just as hard as the first golem, it's a much less cunning and skilled fighter. It lacks the many armor buffs its partner has, and obviously this one doesn't have psionics. Rather than a second Dark Ancient, it appears to be an ordinary clay golem. But after testing his opponents in the first round, the Dark Ancient has assessed the targets, calculating Black to be the most durable opponent, plus the Cleric had some spells and items which could even inflict damage back on an attacker. Little One was only slightly less tough, but his offensive tools were much more effective against this body's defenses. And though the Monk was much more vulnerable, even with his new bracers of armor, he was also the least dangerous of the three, and so it begins systematically pounding on Little One, hitting him 2 or 3 times in some rounds, averaging 20 damage each time.
Attack me, damn it! I'm supposed to be the tank.
I think it may have figured that out on its own.
Counting the -2, I hit AC 28.
That's a miss.
Damn! It's a good thing that second golem isn't like this guy, or we'd be in trouble.
I don't like the math. It's not a clay golem at all. It's a math golem! Wait a second. If this thing jumps bodies, like what happened to the lumberjack, and like the one we fought in Ginneron, we need to kill them both at the same time. Or at least weaken the second one.
That's right, because when we're about to take him down, he could just start over.
But would his buff spells change bodies with him? I have no idea. We just don't understand enough about these things.
Well, I'll take the big one.
Mahara uses his acrobatic skills to reposition, and he and Angel start wailing on the regular clay golem. Its damage reduction is still a hindrance, but the Bane enchantment on Angel's weapon counteracts that pretty well, and with a 10-point lower armor class, they are about as unlikely to miss this enemy as they were unlikely to actually hit the Dark Ancient. Black actually switches temporarily to healing Little One, as even the Half-Dragon's massive hit points start running low, and Draven decides the situation really does warrant some expensive wand charges, particularly since Orb of Force ignores damage reduction, most of the Golem's armor class, and has no saving throw. Sure, 10d6 force damage, so he takes 10. What? As an immediate action, he manifests Dampen Power, reducing any randomly rolled damage from a single spell or psionic power to the minimum it could roll.
What level power is that?
Level 2. Then he can do that all day long. F*** it. I'm taking my wife and flying away. Tempting though that may be, of course he doesn't. Black turns around and casts Fell the Greatest Foe on Angel, a spell that grants her bonus weapon damage for every size category larger her target is. And between her now massive damage against large constructs, and Little One's own big damage and DR bypassing attack moves, they managed to drop the Dark Ancient. The second clay golem was still standing, but the evil Warforged spirit didn't jump into it, and they finished it off easily.
That was rough.
You and I have a lot of healing to do.
I'm gonna make this thing's head into a urinal.
I think I have the craft pottery skill. I do, and sculpting.
I'm going to pee in him all the time.
Until it starts casting spells.
Inflict pain.
Ugh, that's terrible.
Out of the men who had flagged them down before the ambush, the one who had fallen ill had actually been dead for some hours, maybe even a day before the caravan arrived, and another one was smooshed under Jimmy's horse. Little One went over to interrogate the lone survivor of the three, while Zahir and Black had barely started healing everyone, when a third clay golem burst out of the ground with glowing yellow eyes.
Round 2. Fight!
Rather than take over the damaged second golem, the Dark Ancient had moved into the still hidden third one. The only buff that came with him was his schism power, since that one purely affected his mind, not his body. But with its help he had cast 4 buffs in 2 rounds, while the heroes thought the battle was over. On his third turn after the transfer, he used a move action to burst up from the shallow ground, right next to Angel.
I have reassessed your threat level and determined a more efficient way to end this. Domination.
Black and Little One, you each need to make a DC 21 will save. This is an important one.
Damn it! I'm rolling so badly today.
Come on, I just need to roll better than a 5. Don't roll a 5.
He rolls a 4. Black and Little One are both mind-controlled.
He has area mind control? What is that, a 9th level spell?
It's just the psionic version of Dominate Person, but he can augment it to hit an additional target within 15 feet. Little One, that is a dangerous enemy spellcaster in front of you. You need to destroy him before he can hurt your friends. Black, you've been working with that honorless assassin for some time. You always knew you couldn't trust her, but she has finally betrayed you. You need to take her out before she can get to Draven.
Duh. What do I do?
You attack her as effectively as you know how.
Whew, I missed.
You missed 1.
I have to full attack? Duh. I hit her. At least I rolled low on the damage.
Oh, thank you.
Then the headbutt.
Really?
The extra headbutt attack from his version of the magic horned helm also misses, but the situation is worse than dire, with a third of the party turned against them, and nobody left who is tough enough to stand against this deadly and psionically protected golem. Zahir uses his last dispel trying to free their minds, but the Dark Ancient's caster level is a little higher than his, and combined with a small defender advantage on dispel checks, he's down to about a 1 in 3 chance per attempt, and it fails. I am taking my wife and flying away. He's not really joking this time. If this continues for even a couple of rounds, all his allies on the ground will be dead or dominated, and the guards don't stand a chance. Draven has 1 emergency scroll he can try, and if that doesn't work, he figures saving his wife and himself is the best outcome he can hope for. As he scrambles to ready the scroll, Angel and Mahar manage to inflict some damage on the golem, but even with Little One momentarily out of position, Black and the Dark Ancient savage each of them for over 50 damage, leaving them no choice but to desperately disengage, Mahar tumbling over to Zahir for some healing, while Angel heads another direction, hoping to spread out the attackers.
I can cure wounds, Mahar.
That doesn't help, he is undead.
I know. It would help kill him faster.
Alright, I activate my very expensive caster level 15 scroll of Break Enchantment. The normal dispel doesn't improve beyond caster level 10, but this is a higher level spell, which can use the full power of the 15 caster levels Draven paid for. And this means it has better than a 50% chance to negate the Dark Ancient's mind control. He rolls once for each of them, and succeeds on both.
Yes! It's a damn good thing, too, because I'm pretty sure I was going to kill Angel on my turn.
This guy is going to pay for making me hurt my friends.
It raises his hand, and all the bolts leave Draven's quiver, fanning out and stopping in the space around him. Then it closes its fist, and all the bolts telekinetically strike at once. Ah! I'm so dead! 15d8 damage plus another 15d6 frost from my quiver? Not quite. Although weapons hurled by telekinetic thrust inflict their normal damage, ammunition deals damage only as daggers of their size. Right, that makes sense. They aren't getting the kind of velocity they would when fired from a crossbow, and they don't have that much mass. Plus, each one has to make a normal to hit roll, not just touch, though his bonus is based on intelligence rather than dexterity. And your ice quiver does add 1d6 cold damage per arrow normally, but it's designed to be used 1 bolt at a time, so I'd rule that only 1 bolt gets it. That means you're only taking 15d4 plus 1d6, and that's if they all hit, which only about half do. So, take 23. Well, that's not so bad. I'm certainly not dead then, but anytime I take damage, the battle is going horribly wrong. I'm not just being a nice guy. If his quiver could buff every bolt at once, or if using TK on ammo could do that much damage, there's a good chance they'd find a way to abuse those things right back at me. But it looked awesome, ran him out of ammo, and his heart damn near stopped for a sec there. Now, with its dominate broken, the Dark Ancient found herself all alone and surrounded by some very pissed off heroes. Elder Mountain Hammer!
Bane and Fell the greatest foe.
I just hit things. Sound Lance.
It dampens your spell, taking only 10. Then it just used its immediate action for the round, so it can't do anything when I orb a force. Some of their attacks miss or have their damage reduced, but taken together they knock the new clay golem from near full health down to below half. The Dark Ancient's main action is to generate a fiery 40-foot energy burst centered on himself, which does a chunk of damage to Little One, who had already been fairly low, and over 40 to Black since he fails his save. Being reflex for half, Angel easily evaded the entirety of the damage, as did Mahar. But then, the yellow glow fades from its eyes, and the clay golem becomes inert.
Is it over? Or is there a fourth one buried down there?
I certainly hope not. Mahar is nearly dead.
Yeah, nearly.
But if there isn't another golem, then why didn't it keep fighting? This thing had hit points left.
Nothing is invincible. There must be some way to stop it. What if, when we damage the body, the Dark Ancient itself, the energy being, takes damage too?
It certainly spent a lot of effort on defensive buffs.
So if we beat on it a little more, it might have died for real?
If that's the case, what I would do in its place would be to jump into a body I had hidden away, somewhere near the maximum range of the transferability. Even something as simple as a buried homunculus taken from one of these artificers. They healed up as much as they could, with no sign of renewed attack, but even if Draven's theory was accurate, they didn't know what they were looking for or how far it could be. Searching the dead artificers, the party finds a purchase contract for 3 golems, signed by a Captain Thorpe from some place called Dunavar's Spire, which represents a very large purchase for a mere captain to sign off on, but it does kind of explain what the golems were for, defending one of the isolated forts in the Angor mountain range. The party helps with the burial detail, and Sergeant Richards holds a quick but respectful ceremony for Jimmy, where Draven learns that his last name had been Woods. Then they steer the wagons around the giant potholes and head on for the capital. Days later, and about a day out from Castle, the horseman at the rear challenges another rider who is overtaking them, but he quickly waves the stranger forward, calling out to let them pass. Whoever it is, they're in the livery of Duke von Christoph.
Von Christoph?
The Duke of Newland, the direct liege lord of my father-in-law, Baron Silverlode.
It's not just the Newland colors. That was the Duke's daughter and heir, Chrysanthemum.
Shouldn't she have an escort then?
And Sergeant Richards they're right behind her. Well, a couple minutes behind.
Nice horse.
Her steed, Dragonfeather, is actually somewhat famous. Plus, from what I've heard, she can certainly hold her own in a fight, though that's no excuse to go outrunning your guards.
So wait, her name is Chrysanthemum von Christoph. What a mouthful.
You had best stick to Lady von Christoph, if you run into her in court. When they reached the capital, they found that the royal schedule, and their appointment in particular, had been pushed back slightly to accommodate urgent news from Lady von Christoph. As they had been invited, they had the right to remain in audience, though Mahar felt a little uncomfortable hanging around in court like that, and stayed in their quarters instead. Soon, Chrysanthemum's turn to speak arrived, and though she had washed up from her journey and made herself as fit as possible for the royal court, she nevertheless stood before the twin thrones in her travel-stained combat armor, using an excess of perfume to try and cover a week's worth of hard riding. Although her personal guard had arrived not long after her, she had outpaced her housekeeping staff so badly that their wagon had not yet reached the outskirts of Castle.
Your servant, Duke von Christoph of Newland, apologizes that he could not come in person. Although there have been no attacks in over a month, he feels that the present events create the greatest risk of full-on invasion in a generation, and he is doing everything he can to bolster our defenses. The Duke also wishes to express his profound regret and shame for allowing his temper to best him, and for so poorly representing your name and the name of Vistria in this matter.
King Edward von Smith very politely interrupts her. I appreciate your candor and the Lord Duke's regrets in this matter, but you rode here with such haste. Please explain the incident, Lady von Christoph. And she explains that the Duke was inspecting the fortress of Halfwall when the dogs raised the alarm. A lone scum slave was approaching under a flag of truce. But von Christoph and his spotters could see signs of an invisible Diluvian regiment lurking some distance behind him. Though the unseen feet trampling the grass stopped around the edge of crossbow range, the solitary scum appeared to have spotted the standard-bearer of the Duke, and continued until he was only a few feet from the base of the wall. Then, shouting upwards in surprisingly good common, he made a shocking pronouncement.
A Diluvian peace offer.
On behalf of the Diluvian Emperor, the scum pledged that they would end hostilities and return a large section of northern Verandi to the humans with only a few conditions, including maximum military force levels within the reclaimed lands only, and a freeze on Vistria's total naval strength.
Knowing what a Diluvian's word is worth, my father, the Duke, became incensed by the slave's insinuations and superior attitude and...
He jumped off the wall?
Killing the peace messenger?
The lady did apologize for that.
I'm starting to like these von Christophs. That Duke does have some style.
But what happened? Duke von Christoph of Newland, the man known as the Bloody Shield, had literally leapt from the parapets of the fortress, killing the scum messenger, and breaking his ankle pretty badly. As he stared outwards, he was covered by dozens upon dozens of his archers, and a mounted sortie was ready to open the gates at an instant's notice, but a little over 100 feet away were who knows how many Kuatoa, invisible in their Kolos cloaks. And they laughed.
I see that we were mistaken to present this offer here. We will seek a leader with more ability to make decisions.
And the invisible force wandered off, making no effort to hide the noise of their armored movements. The cavalry rushed out to surround and protect their duke, but he refused any aid, hobbling back through the gate under his own power.
I rode with all haste to inform you as soon as possible of these events, because if their offer still stands, the decision is yours to make, my lord. However, as your faithful servant, the Duke of Newland recommends against accepting the word of the Diluvians. He is certain that any peace they make will serve only their ends, if they do not simply break it.
Having much to consider, King Edward closed his court for the remainder of the day, so that he, his council, and King Hondo could discuss this surprising situation in private, and so the party's appointment was pushed back to the next day. A member of Draven's staff went to work trying to get the Marquis invited into the closed session, as Rowan, the province of his ancestors, lay within the proposed demilitarized zone. But Zahir and Mahar felt out of place in the luxury of the palace, so they went down into the city at the base of the mountain. The next day, all of them except Mahar were back in court, once again awaiting their turn. During some regular business, Father Marland, the hand's official representative within the court, took Draven and Black aside.
Have you met Father Fields? No? I should really introduce you.
He ushered them down the hall into a side room, where a pot of coffee was being kept warm on the hearth, though there was no sign of any servants, just a very fit man in a simple jacket.
Marquis, Brother Black, good to formally meet you. I've seen your faces a few times around the Basilica, but we always seem to be headed in different directions. Would you like some coffee? They have the good stuff in these waiting rooms. It's from Long Rock, very aromatic.
Okay, I like this guy already. Recently back from abroad, Father Fields, it turns out, is another person who the Hand of Sirius sends out to handle dangerous and unusual tasks, much like the party.
You know the artificers and the relic crafters, always sending people like us out for some giant squid's beak, or dried eyes, or polka dot lotus flower, or for the hands of a monitor.
Fields told them that the Hand had an important task for him, but he had heard of the party's deeds and was hoping they could take on the mission in his place.
I came back to Castle for a reason.
Let me ask you a hypothetical. If you controlled the Diluvian Empire, with all you know about them, with all the power they have, and you wanted to conquer a kingdom, what's the first thing you would do? Maybe before your army even touches the beaches.
Spy on them? Learn all their troop movements?
That's a part of it, but...
Assassinate the enemy leadership. Send a monitor.
Exactly. The Varandi forces were decapitated, and yet we still have a Varandi king. Why? Some of my ancestors were at the palace, at Forge, to protect the king. And when that king, in a time of war, refused to flee, 2 of my ancestors stayed with him to make their final stand in the throne room, while a third spirited away the queen and princess to preserve their line.
Father Fields had decided, after his last mission, that it was time for him to take up the mantle of the king's shadowy protector. The heroes weren't sure what to make of this, but they agreed to at least communicate with the Basilica about the mission, and then they were ushered back into the court, where they noted that Chrysanthemum's entourage must have arrived, as she had changed from that unpleasant armor I've worn for a week look to crisp, clean plate in the more ornamental style typically worn by Vistrian nobles. But now it was their turn. Introducing the Marquis of Rowan, Brother Black, Little One, Angel, and Zahir, the warriors who defeated the Orcs at Silverlode mere days ago. There is surprised applause from the assembled nobles and courtesans. Before that, they confronted the ungodly evils in Woodbridge, riding into danger for no other reason than that no others should bear its brunt. Though the horrors of that place could not be undone, these heroes slew all the monsters which lingered there, and destroyed a portal to the Dark Realm.
These deeds have been confirmed both by Count Midgard and by other sources. The representative of the Dwarven Lord, Don di Corso, has also made plain that without their valuable assistance he may never have been able to provide us with the spoons of plenty which now help feed tens of thousands of people in the refugee camps.
This prompts loud and generally heartfelt applause. King Edward von Smith of Vistria rises, and slightly to his side and behind him, the Verandi King, Hando Van Smith, rises as well. It is Vistria who speaks, though.
Marquis, gentlemen, lady, you, perhaps more than anyone else here, are truly of the ilk of our father.
When the kings say, our father, they mean the first of their line, the Smith.
Your prowess as warriors must be exceptional, but more than that, you have persevered through great hardships to accomplish deeds which rise beyond our petty conflicts. To bring health and hope to so many people is a success which does you great honor and also honors the gods we hold most dear. Even had you not defeated 2 groups of deadly enemies within my realm, you would be worthy of praise for that. Leaving Lord Draven aside, for the moment, the most appropriate honor I could bestow upon you might not be what you want, being from distant lands and not yourselves Vistrians. But, if you so desired, I would anoint you each a Knight of the Realm, making you a member of the nobility of Vistria with the appropriate rights, privileges, and responsibilities. But you would have to swear fealty to me. It is a serious oath, and we'll think no less of you if you decline. You would generally be free to pursue your own destinies, but you would be duty-bound to protect the safety of this nation and of its people, and would have to answer should you be called upon by the crown. This knighthood would carry an effective rank of captain in the Vistrian military, putting him on the same level as the commanding officers of many forts. Yet they all end up choosing the other option presented, a royal letter of commendation which still granted them rank equivalent to a lieutenant, but with very little responsibility. Then he turned back to Draven, the Marquis of Rowan, and effectively, in more diplomatic and subtle language than I could muster for him, made it clear that, obviously, if they were to accept the Diluvian Treaty, Draven could take his place as lord of his ancestral lands, but that issue would make it retroactively awkward to grant him any other holdings now, like, say, a certain vacant barony within the county of Midgard. But His Highness indicated that if Vistria ended up rejecting the peace offer, it is a near certainty that some appropriate land could be found in the future to grant to the Marquis in its place, which all sounded good to Draven. There was also a moment, while King Edward was speaking, that King Hondo of Verandi met Draven's eyes, and he, a man more than a decade older than his host, can communicate a hell of a lot in a glance, and an understanding passed between them of just how much the monarch in exile appreciated and honored the great difference that Draven has made in the lives of many of his subjects. After being bestowed these honors, and some small, symbolic financial rewards, they stepped back into the audience, sitting through some other presentations or pleas seen by the court, when a soldier of the palace guard bursts into the throne room, speaking rapidly but quietly to Lady Redpath, Marshal of the Vistrian forces, who in turn addresses the king.
There's an unknown ship approaching the castle docks.
Forgive me, my lady, your highness, but it's not a ship. It's a small boat.
A boat? Next time on Tales from My D&D Campaign.
What are you doing?
Samples obtained? Negative. I underestimated their capabilities. We must determine the mechanism of their astral resistance. Their survival is troubling, but they appear to be an exception. This does not alter the plan. The likelihood of their direct interference remains low. Then we proceed. Proceed.